everybody. Thank you for coming to Conservation Conversations. My name's Laurel. This event is hosted by the Escondido Creek Conservancy. We're a nonprofit that's been around since 1991, and we're celebrating our 35th this year. I see a lot of familiar faces, so we are selling shirts. I put one on as a model today. If you want a shirt or a bag before you leave today, we have a QR code back there. And I want to shout out Jimbo's, our food sponsor. They're on Center City Parkway in Escondido. Please go support them. They support us for all of our volunteer events and for Conservation Conversations. Lots of local produce, healthy foods. They're an amazing partner. So big love to Jimbo's. Thank you guys so much for being here. Our last one of the year will be in October. They're always the second Thursday of the month, 6 to 7 p.m. Always here at this beautiful interpretive center. So I'm pleased to welcome Brooke.
Thank you. Hey guys, I'm Brook Sarson with Catching H2O, and our company has been around, well, as Catching H2O since 2016, but before that we were doing this as another company since 2008, installing greywater systems and rainwater systems, working on policy, advocacy, all sorts of stuff for basically localizing water. In 2008 we were in a pretty significant drought, and when I learned that 90% of our water was imported into the San Diego region, I thought it was pretty strange that we weren't talking at all about, storing rainwater in our backyards and reusing greywater. The only conversations were about desalination plants and more reservoirs and such, which that's all big infrastructure, and when you look at all the numbers, it takes a lot more energy, time, resources, long-term maintenance, all of that kind of stuff. So, it's like also we feel like we don't have much control over the water supply situation, and nowadays it's more popular than it was, but growing food, growing pollinators, making our neighborhoods beautiful. All of that stuff comes at a cost because we only do get 10 inches of water a year falling from the sky on average. Well, maybe a little bit more out here, maybe more like 12, into the 14-inch region area, but still limited for a lot of the kinds of food that we would like to be eating, or maybe plants that we would prefer to be growing. So, definitely grow natives. So I kind of got started on this journey about rainwater harvesting and greywater harvesting, and kind of realized before too long that I actually needed to get under people's houses and cut pipes and do all this work. So we became contractors, and in order to be able to teach you all and help you guys understand what it takes to make these systems happen, how much they cost, how you can even do them yourselves. So that's what we've been doing for almost 20 years now, and this is my favorite part of the job, is standing in front of you and talking to you about it. Doing installs for people is great, and we've done hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of greywater installations all over San Diego. So if you're doubtful that these things are for you, or that they make sense, or that they work, please know people all over the county are using greywater systems. It's legal. It's encouraged by some municipalities. For a little while there was a rebate program for City of San Diego. But it's a lot to understand. It's not, I think some people have a very oversimplified way of thinking about what a greywater system is, and some people think they're way more complex than they need to be. So hopefully today we'll dispel some myths and help you understand what this could look like for you. So what is greywater? I think is the best place to start. Legally, greywater is water from your bathtubs, your showers, your lavatory sinks. It is not water from your toilets, nor is it water from your kitchen sinks, which some people use the water from their kitchen sinks, but there's a lot more bacteria, a lot more fats, and it is a lot harder to manage. So technically that is considered black water and not usable as grey water. And so why does gray water make sense? Well, if you look at how a typical family uses, or a typical residence uses water, most of our landscape in California, most of our water use for residential in California is used in our landscapes. Anywhere from 50 to like 75% of a home's use is in their landscape. You know, depending if you're growing natives or a lawn, for example. But when you start to look at some of the other water that you're using, you can see that, you know, you can probably get a pretty good match of your indoor water to be using outdoors, especially if you do certain things like have really efficient irrigation, you know, maybe plant natives in certain places and things like that. So these are some of the rules of gray water, just good little tips to know. You guys don't have to know the whole code to understand the simple facts that you do need to divert gray water. You need to be able to divert gray water back to the sewer or the septic system. So just straight running your shower water outside or your laundry water outside, not technically legal, and I wouldn't advise it. I see a lot of systems like that. People buy a house and they're like, I don't know what's going on here, but it's like there's water out here all the time, and it's like somebody had just plumbed it outside. I always recommend a diverter valve. I mean, there's certain reasons you would want to, like if you want to run a load of laundry with bleach, or if you designed your gray water system for a certain amount of water use, like, you know, your 2 showers a day or whatever, and all of a sudden you have guests come in and now you're producing water of 4 or 6 showers a day, and it might be too much water for your landscape. Or if it's raining and everything's flooded and you have heavy clay soil and it's not percolating very well, you really don't want to then send out bacteria-laden water to like flood and pool. So there's a lot of good reasons to put in a diverter valve. It does complicate things at times because now you have to like actually get into the plumbing under the house and things like that. But all of that is, you know, workable. You don't store gray water, so that's another big myth. A lot of people are like, oh, I'm just going to get this big tank and I'm just going to send all my gray water in there and then I'll use it as I want to. You cannot store gray water for more than 24 hours. It has bacteria in it. It will go anaerobic and it will not be healthy for your little home environment, you know, for the birds, your pets, your kids, all of that kind of stuff. You don't want to spray it. Aerated bacteria is also not good. So we're not putting gray water into sprinkler systems. It's being diverted in other ways like flood irrigation and things like that. And you do need to release it under 2 inches of something. We recommend mulch because it creates a healthier soil system. People sometimes use gravel or rock and it's just a mess to clean, so I don't recommend that. But what you want is the water to basically pool underneath mulch or something, so it's not just sitting and pooling on the surface, so you can't come into contact with it. And that you don't want it to be running into the storm drains, down into the canyons, you know, into your neighbors' yards, because it does have bacteria in it, and this is just not allowed. You don't want to be sending that stuff to your neighbors. This is what gray water looks like if it sits for a long time. So I just like to give you this picture so you don't do this. Don't store it somewhere or let it pool into something like that. Lots of good questions that I'm sure maybe some of these fit for you. Hopefully you'll get your questions answered by the end of the talk. I think one of the biggest things for you to understand is how to get to the plumbing of your gray water feature, whether it's your laundry, your washing machine, or your shower. Don't forget, for a shower, the plumbing is underneath the shower. So if you have a slab foundation, that plumbing is embedded in concrete. You're not going to get access to it. Except on the rare occasions that it's it's near an outside wall and you're doing a remodel. If you're pulling the shower out, that's a good time to plumb it for gray water. So that's something to think about. Otherwise, if you have a crawl space, you know, crawling under there, accessing the shower pipes is great. If it's in an upper floor, if you have a second story and the shower's maybe over the garage, you would cut open the ceiling of the garage and find the plumbing of the shower, and then you could divert it outside. So there are limitations to doing this. It's not like one size fits all. You're not gonna just buy a thing and plug it in. You still have to do the plumbing part of it, actually. With laundry water, it's a little bit different because most people's washing machines are in the garage or near an outside wall, and we're actually rerouting the laundry water using the little pump on the washing machine. So you can detach it from the existing plumbing that potentially goes into the slab and then just run it out into the landscape. And I'll show you a little bit more about that. So no using it on your lawn, no storing it, no using it in your irrigation system. You can buy an off-the-shelf system if you want, but you still have to do the plumbing and you still have to know how to use it in your landscape. The off-the-shelf systems that you'll find are typically a box with a pump and maybe a filter. So you still have to get the water coming into there, and then you still have to know how to distribute it out there. So I don't recommend those systems, but that's another conversation. So the point of using gray water is to irrigate, right? And so a lot of people are like, well, I have a septic system, so why would I use gray water? Well, septic systems put the water down 3 to 5 feet below the surface. So maybe a very well-established tree will be accessing that water, but not much else. With the gray water system, we're typically sending the water to the upper 4 to 18 inches, and so you're trying to actually get it to the roots of all the plants that you want to grow in your garden. So you want to irrigate, out at the root zones. And the way you do this is by creating little flood basins. So that way the water can pool and soak in down at the root system where you want to water the plants. So we're thinking more, not just about the plants above ground and not just irrigation in standard terms where you're like, maybe have a drip system and you can set it at a certain rate and you know how many gallons are going out to this tree. We're doing a little bit more of like a natural flow here. So you want to think about not just what's going on above the surface, but also what's going on below the surface. How the water is going to perk into the soil, where the roots of the plants are, where they meet, and where you can irrigate efficiently that way. And when you are pooling water, you definitely don't want to be pooling it next to your foundation. So a lot of people maybe have plantings around the foundation of their house. These are not ones I would recommend for gray water. So soil percolation is a big thing, out here. I think we have a lot of really heavy clay soils. I mean, we probably have a lot of kind of weird rocky, DG situations out here. Maybe sometimes on the coast we get a little sandy. But what you don't want is gray water to just pool and sit. So you can actually do a little percolation test in your backyard to see how quickly the water will percolate and figure out how much area you actually need to create for the water to be able to flood into based on how much water you anticipate sending out. And we'll talk about water budgeting in a minute. This is kind of technical, but it's just so you understand there is a relationship between how much water you're sending out and how quickly it's going to perk and how your plants are going to use it. So it's much more of like an ecological conversation that we're having instead of just like a kind of like off-the-shelf like construction item that you want to plug into your yard. So when you're using gray water, we want to use mulch. We want to create healthy living soil so the soil can actually like handle all the bacteria, the soaps, like whatever's coming off of our bodies in the shower or in the laundry. You want to create like a living system, and so mulch helps with that. And so you don't really, a gray water system wouldn't necessarily be appropriate for a landscape that was more like this, like DG and natives, not so much, but if you had areas that you could create little hidden basins in the mulch and you have plants around them, that would be great. Some plants don't like gray water because they're sensitive to the salts, or they're sensitive to the alkalinity, or they don't like to be watered that much. So like avocados are salt sensitive. Blueberries prefer a more acidic soil. For example, and like some hardy natives and succulents, obviously they don't want to be watered a lot, and so they might be a little bit more sensitive if you're sending a lot of gray water out there all of a sudden. You also don't want to surface flow gray water onto lawns or anything like that, and you don't want to water sensitive vegetables like root vegetables or lettuces and things like that, things that you're going to put in your mouth that are living close to where the water is going to be coming out. But fruit trees and all of that kind of stuff, not a problem at all, because you're not really worried about anything that's in the gray water working its way up through the plant tissue into the fruit. It's more just if it splashes onto the plant, the part of the food that you're going to eat. So, you know, I've seen citrus trees go from like meh, you know, you get a couple a year and you're like, ooh, I'm growing citrus in San Diego, this is awesome, to like just loaded, completely loaded, because we're not probably watering these plants as much as we should, because we're stingy with water, because we're good conservationists, you know. But when you do the great calculations and you know how much the plant needs, and you give it the right amount of water that's just coming out of your shower, the plants go crazy. It's really awesome. Because there's also a lot of extra nutrients in this water, right? Soaps have things like potassium, phosphorus, nitrogen, fertilizer free, you know? Not to mention, you know, all your dead skin cells, you pee in the shower, like all of that stuff. It's like free food for the plants. The microorganisms just chew them up and turn them into, you know, good soil fertility. So, you know, things like roses, you know, whatever your typical landscaping plants, a lot of these plants will just love gray water. So there's 4 basic systems that we use, and when I say we use, again, we're not doing anything off the shelf. When we're doing gray water, it's literally, you can get plumbing supplies and just implement them in a slightly different way than usual. So it's just standard pipes and stuff like that. But we found a few different ways that you can do these systems for varying types of landscapes or varying amounts of water that you're producing. So the simplest one is laundry to landscape. This one is perfectly legal, does not require a permit in the state of California. And the awesome thing about it is you are not doing anything with the existing plumbing of your house. You're actually disconnecting the washing machine from the existing standpipe and putting it into a 3-way valve that allows you to turn it either back to the sewer or out to gray water. And then there's a tiny little pump on the washing machine. And believe it or not, it's strong enough to take and push that water out, you know, maybe even as much as 100 feet out into your landscape. So you don't have to rely on gravity, which is really cool. But there are some caveats. You know, a simple little hose, like you know, your typical yard hose, might be too small. It might constrict the flow. So we use a 1-inch pipe. You don't want the water to continually siphon out of the washing machine as it's pumping, so we have a little anti-siphon valve to break the siphon. I mean, by the time you look at all the parts for a typical laundry system, it might end up being like $400 worth of parts. So these systems can be pretty economical. So once you have the diverter valve in place and you are sending the water out to the landscape, you dig basins around the root systems of the plants and trees, and you just are doing flood irrigation. It's not in an irrigation system. It's small, like 1/2-inch lines coming off of a 1-inch line so that you can have many emitters. It keeps pressure in the line. If you had 6 you know, like 1-inch open lines, it would lose all of its pressure and it would become a gravity system. But doing this, you can even sometimes we'll send it like down under the walkway and then up onto a small terrace, and that will work. It's actually pretty cool. Pros and cons. I'm gonna have to go kind of through some of this pretty fast to get through, but anyway, I think this is the other important part is water budgeting. It's like, how much water are we even talking about? Like, how can this even make sense? Well, if you have a top load washer, the older top load washers use like 50 gallons a load. So if you had like 10 fruit trees, a fruit tree in our region usually uses about 25 gallons a load. It could be 25 to 50 gallons a load, but let's just say 25 gallons a load. You would need 250 gallons to water your 10 fruit trees, right? Well, if you had, if you did 5 loads a week with an old top load washer, you could water all of those trees just with your washing. And so when people are like, oh, should I get rid of my machine and get a new machine to do water conservation? I'm like, no, you're gonna water those trees anyway. Keep your old machine, it's probably gonna last forever compared to the new ones, you know, and just divert the water out. But the newer front loaders only use about 10 gallons a load. So if you're, you know, a small family and you're only doing like 1 or 2 loads a week, it might not make sense to do a Greywater system unless you have like a special lime tree that's like right outside the garage and it's just an easy line right out or something like that. But you know, your standard is, you know, a family of 4, maybe 4 loads a week. You have a top load washer. That's 100 gallons a week that you're producing if you're, you know, doing 4 loads. And that's 4 fruit trees. So I say do it. It's worth it. Typical laundry installation, you know, might be anywhere from like $1,500 to $2,500 professionally if we're doing all the like the landscape portion of it as well, which is like digging basins and stuff. So if you look at the amount of gallons that you'll be able to reuse over the course of a year and then the next 20 years or whatever, I always find that it works out way more efficiently for a laundry Greywater system than to buy that much rainwater storage, for example, because a rainwater tank is very expensive. So even a 1,000-gallon rainwater tank is going to cost you more than, you know, that $1,500, $1,700 that the Greywater system will, and you'll get way more than 1,000 gallons a year out of your Greywater system. Does that make sense? So you've got your diverter valve, so if you're going to use bleach or if it's raining or if you've got people staying at your house that don't want it, that really would rather use Tide, then you can turn it back to the sewer. You've got your soap, and there's plenty of soap, so we'll talk a little bit more about that later. And you've got your infrastructure, which is your basins in the ground near your trees. Obviously, after this, you're going to cover it up with mulch, so I'm not saying have a pool of water just in your yard, but this is just an example of what it looks like before it gets covered up. So once it gets covered up, you don't even know it's there. Talked about the diverter valve. This is another example of basins in the yard. These ones are also designed to catch rainwater, which is great because rainwater can help flush some of those salts that build up in your soil. And also build up, it's like a battery of water in your landscape for, you know, going into the dry season. But this is a before picture, watch for it, and there's an after picture. So you can see this basin here, and then afterwards it's like, you know, plants around it filled with mulch. So basins don't have to be big ugly structures. They're just tools in the landscape. You just have to think a little bit differently about how to lay plants out around them and such, but you can still get a lot of coverage and it can be very beautiful, and then it can be watered with your laundry. Here's another example of, you know, digging some basins in the landscape, and next thing you know, you overlay the plants and put in the mulch and you don't even know any of that's there. The biggest issue with a lot of our soaps is salt, especially when we have heavy clay soil, because the salt particles can't work their way through the soil as well, and so they'll tend to accumulate on the surface, and I'm sure many of you have seen this, like the little like white crystals like on the surface of like very compacted soil. And so we want our landscapes to be healthy. So finding soaps with less salt in them is important. And it's not just about, it's like eco-friendly. Like Seventh Generation is a great company, but if you look at the ingredients in their laundry soap, sodium is listed like 7 times. It's got like an ingredients list that's 50 ingredients long, and you're like, what kind of chemicals are all of these things, you know? So find things that are more natural, fewer ingredients, sodium or salt listed fewer times, and maybe in a more natural form. You'll be fine. Don't put down borax or bleach into your laundry soap. You love making your own laundry soap to save money. It's probably a powder, and a powder is probably based with like sodium bicarbonate, which is sodium. So that's probably not going to be great for your Greywater, unless you have really sandy soil or really healthy soil system, and then it might not be an issue. I would say start with something that's a little bit more pure, and then you can degrade after that. I think this is what we're talking about. Like everybody's probably kind of seen something like that where the salts just accumulate on the surface. We want to avoid that. So as far as maintenance, these systems are super low maintenance because there's not a lot of bells and whistles, right? It's just redirecting the water outside. The biggest maintenance is just making sure that your mulch basins are still infiltrating. So if you see water pooling and not going down anymore, that probably means the mulch is compacted, it's deteriorated and compacted. You might need to dig it out and refill it with like a larger mulch. Which, you know, honestly, we see that happening maybe for some systems it's every couple years, but for some systems it's been 10 years and it's still not an issue, because what's happened is all the soil around it has improved incredibly, and so it doesn't actually matter if the mulch is degraded into soil, because the actual basin and the soil system is still doing the work of taking all the water and infiltrating it. But, you know, if like some plants are more aggressive, like bananas, you know, things like that, and if you don't, you know, make sure that the outlets are clear and stuff on a routine basis, you might find that the roots crawl right up those to find the water. So the next one that is the easiest and most inexpensive system, but produces far more volume, is a simple shower system with gravity. So basically running water from your showers and your sinks through a Greywater valve into, just flooding right into basins. So these basins need to be a little bit better developed because you're sending a lot more water, and we'll talk about the water budget of a shower. So it's a few simple plumbing parts, so not a lot of money. Maybe you'll spend $300, $400 on parts, maybe a little bit more if you get an actuator with a remote switch. But the maintenance is easy. You don't have pumps, you don't have things to plug in, filters to clean, anything like that. The water just flows directly outside. So this is where we all probably need to think more about how much water we use at our homes, and if this is a good fit for you. A typical shower head uses about 2 gallons per minute. So each of you could say to yourself how many minutes a day you think you shower, or you could say minutes a week. But generally I ask people how many showers a day are being taken and how long are they. So, I hear everything from like 3 minutes to like 48 minutes. So, yeah. So, if there's 2 people living in the home, we'll assume like 2 showers a day, 10 minutes. That's 20 minutes of showering at 2 gallons per minute. That's 40 gallons of water a day, okay? So 40 gallons of water a day for 7 days, that's 280 gallons. That's like 10 or 11 fruit trees worth of water from your shower, okay? So using it with, are you giving me the signal? No. Oh, okay.
There's so many flags back here. They're gonna block signals for me.
So, it's harder to work with that much water flooding out, but there's creative ways to do it if you're willing to work that into your landscape. If you have a very precise landscape where you have like a plant over here, a plant over here, a plant over here, this system might not be for you. But if you're in the middle of developing a yard, you could, kind of create 2 kind of long, biggish basins and then plant trees on either side of them, and you could very efficiently water all 12 of those trees with like 2 flood lines, and so anyway, bathtub is about 35 gallons, so if you take a bathtub every day, that's more than a 10-minute shower, but you can figure all of that out for yourself. And the plumbing, kind of looks like this. The venting is really important. The P-traps are important, so finding the plumbing after the P-traps and the vents is what will make the system work the best. And there's a different valve, I forgot to bring it in, but it's actually a simple like spa valve. So it's not, again, there's nothing like Greywater specific here, we're just repurposing things that already exist. And that way you can turn it back to the sewer or out to the garden. Here's another example, and this is a good example for if you're doing a remodel and your plumbing is near an outside wall. You can do a little loop from the shower drain outside, and then just after inspection or after you're done with your project, put the 3-way valve out here and get the water out. Everybody has different ways of being able to interpret these. So sometimes those aren't helpful, but maybe something like this is. And so this was like during a construction project. This was all going to be a slab. The shower is going to be right here. So we had the plumbers put in a loop coming out of the foundation, and so afterwards we were able to come in, put the valve here, put, you know, surge tank or whatever. Other examples, you know, this is the main plumbing line, this is the Greywater line. So he brought it out, tied it back in outside of the house, and now this would go to the Greywater. Another little loop, you know, ready for Greywater to run. This would be like in an upper story. This woman was very smart and took these pictures before everything got drywalled. And so we came in a couple years later and we knew right where the P-trap was, so that we could put our Greywater valve here in the ceiling and get the water out, which was great. Here's another example of one in a ceiling under a shower. This one was kind of funky. That was like a tight spot, but you know, you have things to deal with like joists and stuff. This is, I'll go into a little bit later maybe, but an actuator. It's a little motor on the valve, so that instead of having to crawl under the house to turn the valve, or you know, reach up into the ceiling every time you want to do it, you can have a little switch right in the bathroom. So you're like, it's raining outside, I really shouldn't send my Greywater outside. You don't have to like go crawling around to make it happen. It's just a simple setup. This is what it looks like to go under a house. It's not super fun, but it's doable. Every situation is different, but obviously nobody's going to want to crawl under their house to change that valve, so it's nice to have the remote control access. This is a flood irrigation basin, one example. This is actually here in Escondido. Really, really sweet project. Good crawl space, lots of fall. There's a flow splitter here, which allows the flow to split in half. You install it perfectly level, and the water splits in half. So half of it comes out here, half of it comes out here. I don't know, it's probably like 5 years later. Again, like you see these guys, they're right here. And all of these trees, like if there's 8 trees or something, and they're just all irrigated by just that shower water, that 3-person family. Here's another example. This one's in North Park. So just a simple little Greywater basin. I mean, had to make it fit the area. And then this is, sorry, from the other angle, but you can see the indentation, but you don't really know that there's Greywater in there, and so all of these plants are benefiting from that Greywater. Just different ways to think about creating basins, and really making sure that these outfalls are free and clear. They're not going to be buried in the dirt, so you kind of have something to protect them so that you don't have to, they don't get clogged. Maintenance, again, you know, if the mulch is deteriorating, you start to see water pooling or flowing out of it. Bananas, again, that's like the key here, crawling up into the pipes. So this was like the early installation. You see a problem over here, you come back, dig the basin out, and you know, you're good to go. That was probably like 4 years later that we had to do that, so it held for quite a while. Looking at just ingredients of a standard, you know, shampoo or conditioner, second ingredient, sodium lauryl sulfate. Over here, another sodium, another sodium, another sodium, another sodium. So this is like a standard ingredients list. I mean, I can't tell you what specific shampoos and conditioners to use. Formulations change all the time, but err on the side of things that are not just have one plant in their title and make you think it's natural, but like have more natural ingredients in general. I was actually pretty surprised at herbal essence, actually. So not too bad, but so then we'll just talk about pumping, and pumping is actually a really good trick to have in your back pocket, but it does add some maintenance and you know, just more things to break. You know, having a pump is just, it's annoying. I mean, we've done a lot of these systems, and there's definitely a time and a place, but if you can avoid it, stick with the first two. If you have a more spread out landscape, or you're producing a lot of water, you might need to spread it out more. that's when, or you have issues with fall, like if the outfall of your pipe from your plumbing is very far below grade, you might not be able to get it to flood out to your landscape, so you might need to get it into a surge tank to pump it out. So this then is basically like the laundry to landscape system, but instead of using the pump on the washing machine, we've created a surge tank and a pump to basically spill the water out. Remember, from showers we're using a lot more water, so we can water a lot more plants. So this is actually a very powerful, fairly simple system. So this probably shouldn't be here, but anyway, if you're plumbing a whole house, for example, you might want to do dual plumbing. So you just have all the black water, which is the toilets and the kitchen sink, in one main line, and put all of your other lines into a Greywater line that ties back to the sewer line, but has the ability to then pump water from an outside. This is handy in some ways, but at times, if you're combining all that water, now you definitely need to have a pump. And you know, when you have all that water combined, you have this, like, sometimes you have some crazy plumbing stuff. So when you get into these situations, you're definitely probably needing a pump. First thing you need is a basin for it to go into. There's different kinds of basins, but you know, if you're going to bury it, it needs to be sturdy. Just have a sturdy, solid lid that's not going to let mosquitoes get in. We just perforate these ourselves and put gaskets in for all of our pipes and our electrical. Here's another example, a fiberglass one. These are really rugged for very deep systems that might need to be 4 or 5 feet, sometimes 6 or feet or more deep because of where the outfall of the pipe is. We always have a coarse filter at the pipe inflow, so it catches all the hair and stuff like that. You don't want to really put anything in line with the pipe because if you're not checking it regularly, it's going to get clogged and then you get a backup. So you just want that water to free flow. So it just drops into this filter and you can clean it out pretty easily, and then all the water in here is a little bit cleaner for the pump. Use an effluent pump. You know, lots of different ways to do this with different kinds of controls and mechanisms, but the basic idea is water starts flowing in, the pump kicks on and starts pushing water out. You know, you can set floats for different levels, so you can send a certain amount of volume out every time, like wait and let the water fill up a certain amount every time before it goes out. And we even use these really cool indexing valves. They're just mechanical indexing valves, so instead of having like irrigation valves, we have a zone over there, a zone over there, a zone over there. All this is doing is the first time that the pump comes on and the water starts ejecting, it's going to zone 1. As soon as the pump turns off, the indexing valve switches. So the next time it pumps out to a different zone. It's just one way to spread the water out more. These are what the systems kind of look like. You've got all of your pump and your filter, and you've got, you know, high level alarm and some electrical out here, and then it flows right out to these basins amongst the trees. Cover all of that up with mulch, you don't even know it's there, and every time you take a shower, your orchard is irrigated. Now the next level would be sending it to a drip system. This is where most people start, but this is not where you should start. Because a drip system, sending Greywater, getting Greywater cleaned up to get into a drip emitters is actually expensive and very maintenance heavy. But useful for some people in some situations. You have to use a very special irrigation line that is made for Greywater. You also need a fine filter after the pump to really get out all that fine gunk, otherwise it's just going to clog up all those emitters. And so there are times when these systems are a good idea. This is kind of what the setup looks like. I mean, at the start, this is during a construction project, so it's a lot of coordination, but this would be the post-pump filter. And these are just some examples of, you know, all that plumbing and stuff like that. This is the disc filter that we use for the post pump filter. I mean, it gets so full of crud, and those things you have to clean out. The coarse filters, you know, for the inlet, for the simple system, maybe twice a year, 3 times a year, you just dump them out and wash them out. That's pretty easy. These ones, sometimes as often as every 4 weeks, you have to pull them out and clean them to ensure that the drip systems don't clog. And it's not even that, it's just that everything will clog and the pump won't be able to pump out anymore. So we have pretty robust maintenance program now, because we have enough of these systems that we can't like just leave them alone. But you know, for landscapes like this where you have everything kind of spread out, you have these like narrow terraces, or you're on a steep slope, you really can't flood irrigate these areas. So a drip system's really the only way to go. Again, you know, a really fine little area next to your driveway, you can't flood irrigate this. So those are the kinds of systems that work with those. Wow, I did it. That's good. We do have a water harvesting certificate course coming up. It's not online yet, but it will be the end of September, beginning of October. It's like 8 days, 2 4-day weekends, essentially. Learning to install all of these systems, learning all the design and all of that kind of stuff, but really we have a site in Vista where we're going to be putting in like 5,000 gallons of rainwater storage, a laundry gray water system, a shower gray water system, rain garden. We'll do maintenance at some of our existing clients so you can see these systems and how they progress over the years. And it's just a really great class. But besides this, we also do have, you know, we don't have anything on the books right now, but I'm always looking for sites that are a good match for a workshop. We're talking about maybe a laundry to landscape workshop at the Mountain Meadows Reserve. And so, you know, laundry to landscape, rainwater tank installation, they're easy to do in a day. And so if you're a hands-on kind of person, like I invite you to get on our newsletter and see when we have workshops coming up so that you can come on over and see how easy it is to do. I do have some books that are really good if you're interested. This one was the original Greywater kind of Bible. Art Ludwig created this book. He developed the laundry to landscape system. He created Oasis, you know, laundry detergent. It's a great book. It's a little bit technical, and then Laura Allen came and made everything very tangible. So this is a great book. It's like, this is how you thread, you know, your pipes, and this is how you glue things together, and you know, don't forget your clamp on your PVC and stuff like that. So those are great books. And then for really understanding how to work with the landscape and capture and hold water, whether you're working with rainwater or gray water, Brad Lancaster is, you know, he's amazing, and just talking about how to use the earth to harvest water and all the principles and stuff. That's a great book too. Any questions? Yes?
Is there any sort of special consideration for like filtering like microplastics that come off of synthetic fibers?
This is a great question, and I think it brings up actually a bigger issue, because if you're not going to send it to your landscape, where's it going to go? So it's going to go out into our waterways. And so if you're worried about microplastics in your soil near your plants, then we might need to rethink our clothing choices instead of like trying to filter out all the microplastics. But I haven't seen anything about that. But I mean, even the wastewater treatment facilities can't do it. So if they can't do it, you know.
Okay, cool.
Yeah. And I think that follows with pretty much everything, is like you start to realize how these things impact your yard. Even like copper gutters, and you're not allowed, you know, and then copper goes into the waterways and it has a negative impact on the, you know, on the animals and all, and the ecosystems and stuff. And then, but they're pretty, and we put them in, and then I've had a client who had elevated copper levels in his soil, and it was negatively impacting his plants, you know, and it's like, well, I mean, you know, so, and then that's why it becomes more important, like you realize, oh, this soap that I'm choosing isn't just about like the way it smells or the way it makes my clothes feel. It's actually feeding these living things that I care about in my yard. So I actually need to think about my choices about that differently, because it's not just about like this immediate gratification. It's like, it's having an impact on the living world. And so
you
it's,
are part of the living world, so it's probably not good for you, even if it makes you feel good.
yes.
You know, I mean.
And you know, and then people are concerned about, well, I have sensitive skin. How are these weird laundry detergents going to affect me? I find them to be way better for us
Absolutely.
than like Dreft, or whatever, which has all these ingredients that's supposed to help your baby not have a bad reaction to the laundry detergent, That's my personal experience, but.
I don't really understand sodium, salts, and chemistry, but where does a water softener play into all of this? I imagine it's probably not good.
Thank you. That's a great question. And actually, water softeners and whole house water filters are a great source of gray water if you can get them into your garden. Water softeners that rely on sodium chloride are not good, but if you can use potassium chloride, that will be better. And if your soil is healthy and your plants, and you have a good mixture of plants that have a healthy ecosystem, it will be fine. It will be fine.
I think our water softener has to do this sort of backflow
Yes.
cycle. Do you ever do systems where you utilize that backflow?
Absolutely. And
Okay.
usually those are near the washing machine, so
Outside.
a lot of the
Yeah.
a lot of the times we'll just put them into the same flood patterns, but for the water softeners you want to make sure it's potassium chloride and not sodium chloride. And then that backflush can be 20 to 40 gallons depending on what kind of whole house filter you have, and that's a great resource to be able to reuse. It's not often done well.
So, how far away from the laundry to landscape and probably single or multi-fixture, like how far away can you get that water for your landscaping?
It depends on elevation and a lot of different things, but the washing machine, it's just a little pump, so you don't want to push it too hard. I like to say maybe 50 feet before, not more than 50 feet before you have at least the first outlet. But we push it like 100 feet, 200 feet even. If it's at least a little bit downhill, that'll help. I think the more important thing for the laundry gray water system is how many outlets you can have. You can't just have infinite outlets because you'll lose pressure. So, that's the dance that you're doing, is like the length of tube, not having too much uphill, and then balancing the system. And so we put these just little shutoff valves. Let's just say we have 5 or 6 emitters. I would use 1/2 inch and have little shutoff valves. And if the pipe tends to go like this, you'll find that maybe all the water wants to come out of the first one. So you can dial that way down, almost off, and it'll push it over the hump to the next one, and so forth. And or if the pipe's running slightly uphill, the one downhill is going to get all the water that falls backwards anyway. So you can dial that one almost all the way down and get it to push up to the last one. But as far as like the distance for gravity, that's really about having fall in your pipe. So when you're working with plumbing fixtures, you need a 1/4 inch per foot. So for every 10 feet, you need 2.5 inches of fall. So if you're gonna go 100 feet out, is that 25 inches of fall. So if you think about where your house starts and you think about 25 inches down, do you have that kind of fall in your landscape to then create like a 6 inch to 18 inch deep basin and still get water flooding out into it? Yes.
Are you aware of any legislation or effort to encourage developers to install this system in new developments?
Yeah, thanks for asking. Yeah, Encinitas is the only one in San Diego. Well, Chula Vista was doing some cool stuff for a while, but Encinitas, back in like 2015, they started requiring that all new development requires a Greywater stub out. You don't have to put in a Greywater system, you just have to make it so that at some point you could install a Greywater system. They actually didn't do anything about that, you know, until like probably 2 years ago, because the contractors didn't know how to implement it. The people at the, you know, the inspectors didn't know what to look for, and the people at the permitting agency didn't really know how to like ask people to implement it either. And so this is where I get involved, and I try and show them like this is good practices, you know, because they want to install it, they want to see things that are appropriate for septic systems, for example. That doesn't really help for irrigation, you know, so they're trying to manage it as a waste product. But Encinitas is working on it, and that's great. It is kind of forcing a lot of contractors' hands, but I find the problem is that when the homeowners don't really understand it, they'll just be okay with whatever gets put in, but then they probably won't be able to get put in a Greywater system afterwards, because the invert for the Greywater pipe will be like 3 feet down, and you know it's going to cost too much to put in a surge tank now, or it's, you know, buried under like a concrete walkway, or the landscape has been developed in such a way that you would need like a very expensive Greywater system to actually work. So there's a lot of education that still needs to happen, but Encinitas is one that is at least heading in the right direction. You can also get, I think they have like a whole green building program, so you can get fast-tracked permitting and like a lot of money deducted off of your permitting fees if you follow these like sustainable practices, and Greywater is included in there for that, which is really cool. I think even the county of San Diego includes Greywater as like, if you do these things, we will give you like a fast track. But we have pulled permits all over the county, not in city of Escondido, but most other places in the county for Greywater systems. I would say most people would choose not to get a permit just because it adds so much cost. So we just always do it to code anyway, so you can get, you know, get the permit afterwards if there was ever an issue. But a lot of the permitting processes are, you know, overly complicated. And then when there's always new people at the desks. So they like, you had this conversation just last year about how to properly implement a Greywater system, but that guy's gone now, and so now you have to have it all over again, you know, and this guy's like, oh no, you can't do that. So it's fun. I think I have one more page of just, speaking of, these are really complicated. I don't even know why I have them up here, but City of San Diego County Greywater information, and Encinitas Greywater information. These are more general for Greywater, but other resources. Thank you guys. I'll be at City Farmers Nursery tomorrow talking about rainwater down in San Diego, if you're interested.
Can we buy some of those books off of you?
Yeah.
While you brought them?
Yeah, sure.